So again the organisms have the same two equal halves of the body. That's why they are called bilaterally symmetrical. That's why they are called bilaterally symmetrical. And then they are again triploblastic. They have three layers of cells. Their body is cylindrical in shape. Then tissues are present, but organs are absent. That means even though cells are present, they do not make up to form any organs. Then pseudo body cavity or pseudocoelom is present. That means body cavity is there, but not a real one. It just gives a representation of a shape of a cavity, but it is not real. That is why it is called pseudo body cavity. Then these are parasitic worms. Organisms which come under nematoda are parasitic worms which cause diseases. These are worms which are responsible for causing diseases. So what filarial worm causes elephantiasis. Elephantiasis means the leg becomes very much swollen and very much fat with layers of fat over it and lots of swelling will be there. They say filarial worm has bitten them. You might have seen some people with one leg having very much heavy swelling and not able to walk at all. Lots of increase in size of the leg will be there below the knee or below the thigh. So that is filarial worm elephantiasis. Then in intestines you have sometimes infections. Small kids, doctors give them deworming medicine sometimes because of the presence of worms in the stomach. So in intestines there will be pinworms and roundworms. So these organisms come under nematoda. So this is the diagram of the Ascaris worm. This is the female worm, this is the male worm, and this is Wucheria. So the examples of these parasitic worms which cause disease are filarial worms, pinworms, roundworms, Ascaris and Wucheria worms. So let's move on to Annelida, the fifth group, subgroup. So what are Annelida organisms? Again, Annelida organisms have bilaterally symmetrical body. Body is same but divided into two equal halves. Then again they are triploblastic. Triploblastic is nothing but having three layers of cells. Then they have a true body cavity. The body having a coelom or a cavity. Then what does this body cavity do? This allows organs to be packed into a body structure. So this body cavity allows the organs to be packed in a body-like structure. Then differentiation occurs in segmental forms from top to bottom. So differentiation of the body from one part to another is like in segments from top to bottom. In one segment there will be differentiation of the body. So for example earthworm. So from top to bottom it is segmented. Then they are found in land, seawater as well as fresh water. What are the examples? Earthworms. Earthworms are found in mud, water everywhere. Then leeches. Leeches are found in land. Then these are the examples of the organisms which come under Annelida. So the eighth subgroup of the Animalia kingdom is Echinodermata. So echino is a Greek word which means hedgehog, and then derma means skin. So these are spiny skinned animals. So Echinodermata are spiny skinned animals. Echino is derived from a Greek word called hedgehog, and derma means skin. That's why they are spiny skinned animals. Exclusively free living marine animals. These are exclusively freely living marine animals. Marine means they live only in the salt water, sea water. Then they are also triploblastic. They have three layers of cells. Then they also have a coelomic cavity. Then they have a peculiar water-driven tube. So the exclusive feature is they have a peculiar water-driven system for locomotion. For movement of their body, they have a water-driven tube system. Because they live in the water, they have to move continuously in the water, right? So for that purpose, they have a water-driven tube system for locomotion. And then the outer shell, the outer skeleton is made up of calcium carbonate. The Echinodermata animal's outer shell is made up of calcium carbonate, the outer skeleton. And the examples of these Echinodermata organisms are starfish, sea urchins, and sea cucumber. Now the cucumber which we eat, this is separate from that, right? So what are the cucumbers we eat? We eat yellow colored cucumber, we eat English cucumber for salads, and then we have a green cucumber what we take daily for food and salad. There is a difference between English cucumber and the normal green cucumber called kheera what you get, right? So they are again yellow cucumber. There are many types of cucumber we eat. This is different. This is not an edible cucumber. This is sea cucumber, also called as Holothuria. So this is about Echinodermata. Let's move to the Protochordata, the ninth subgroup of Animalia. So again, Protochordata animals are bilaterally symmetrical. The two halves of the body are equal. Then they are triploblastic, having 3 cell layers. Then they have coelom or cavity in them. Then they have a new feature of the body design in the larval stages. So here Protochordata mainly concentrates on the larval stages of the animal. They are not present throughout their life. The Protochordata structure, the notochord, it is called notochord. In the new feature of the body design in the larval stages is called notochord. So the notochord is not present throughout all the stages of their life. It is mainly concentrated in the larval stage of the animal. So new body design is present in the larval stage called notochord. So what is notochord and what are the functions of notochord? So notochord is a long rod-like supporting structure on the back side of the animal. It resembles like backbone. So it is on the back side of the animal, a long rod-like structure which provides support. Then it separates the nervous tissue from the gut or alimentary canal. Then it runs along the back side of the animal, as I told you earlier. Then it provides place for the muscles to attach. The muscles go and attach to the notochord and they help in the ease of movement. The movement of the body takes place with the help of contraction and relaxation of muscles, right? So these muscles go and attach to the notochord, which is situated at the back side of the animal. Then this is present only in the marine animals, in the larval stages of the marine animals. So what are the examples? Melanoglossus, then Herdmania, then Amphioxus. So Protochordata is seen in Melanoglossus, Herdmania and Amphioxus. So this is about Protochordata. And the last subgroup which we have to deal is Vertebrata. So the last kingdom is Vertebrata. So what comes under Vertebrata? What animals or what organisms? So Vertebrata organisms have a 2 vertebral column and internal skeleton. Protochordata have a notochord in the larval stages. This is vertebra column in the adult stage. So they have 2 vertebral column and an internal skeleton. That means they are fully developed organisms. Then they have different distribution of muscle attachment points for movement. In the notochord stage, the muscles were attached to the notochord, but here again the muscle attachment points changes. They have a different distribution of muscle attachment points for the movement or locomotion of the body. Then they are also bilaterally symmetrical, triploblastic, having 3 layered cells. They are coelomic, having cavity in the body. They are segmented. The body is arranged in segments from top to bottom. Then there is differentiation of body tissues and organs. There are different types of body tissues and there are different organs, and all these are differentiated from each other. Then what are the features of these vertebrates? They have a notochord. In their larval stages they have a notochord. Then they have a dorsal nerve cord. Then they are triploblastic, having 3 layered cells. They have coelom and they have paired gill pouches. The gill pouches are useful for breathing purpose, for exchange of food, water, etc. Then in this vertebra again we have 5 subclasses. What are these subclasses? Species, amphibians, reptiles, aves and mammals. So in vertebrates we have again 5 subclasses: species, amphibians, reptiles, aves and mammals. So coming to species, so what comes under species? So mainly Pisces is also a sun sign, right? Everybody knows Pisces is a sun sign. People born from Feb 20 to March 20 come under Pisces. And the sun, the symbol of the sun sign is sun. The symbol of the sun sign is fishes. People having the sun sign Pisces have the symbol fish always. So what come under Pisces? Pisces are always fishes. They are exclusively aquatic. As you all know, fishes live only in the water. So that is why Pisces are fishes and they are exclusively aquatic. Then the skin is covered with scales type of thing. Even in snakes you observe the skin is covered with scales. Then they have gills for breathing purpose. How do they breathe? They take dissolved oxygen from the water with the help of the gills. Then they have a streamlined body. Then they have muscular tail used for movement. You know fishes have tails. Many of you might be eating fishes daily. Sometimes non-vegetarians take fishes in their diet. So you know the fishes have tails. So that tail part helps in movement. Then they are cold-blooded animals, not like us warm-blooded because they live in water. Then they have a 2-chambered heart. Human beings have 4-chambered heart, whereas fishes have 2-chambered heart. Then they lay eggs. They do not give birth to the young ones directly. First they lay eggs. Then if these species have their body made up of only bone or skeleton, these are called fishes. If the body is made up of cartilage, then it is called sharks. Then if their body is made up of both bone, skeleton and cartilage, such examples are tuna fishes and roe fishes. So let's move to the next topic called amphibians. So the second subclass of vertebrate organisms is called amphibia. So amphibian organisms do not have scales and they have mucus glands in their skin. Like species of fishes, they do not have scales, but they have mucus glands in their skin. Then they have a 3-chambered heart, and then they have gills and lungs that help in respiration. See, frogs, for example, can live both in water and on land. When they are on land, they breathe through their lungs. When they are in water, they breathe through their gills. So these are egg-laying animals. They do not give birth to their young ones directly. They are egg-laying animals. And then they live on land and water both. So for example, frogs live on both land and water. Sometimes when they are in larval stages, they live in water. And when they are adult, they become adults, they come and live on the land. So examples of these amphibian animals are frogs, salamanders and toads. So amphibians animals are a group of animals that do not have scales, but they have mucus glands in their skin. And they breathe both through their gills and their lungs. The heart is 3-chambered and they are egg-laying animals. And they live on both land and water. Examples of such animals are frogs, salamanders and toads. Then coming to the third subclass, that is reptilia. So the reptilia organisms have scales on them. The animals which come under reptilia have scales on them. Then they breathe through their lungs. They are also cold-blooded. They can have a 3-chambered heart or a 4-chambered heart, both. 4-chambered heart is seen only in the crocodile. Rest of the animals have 3-chambered heart, and these are also egg-laying animals. They do not give birth to their young ones directly. They are egg-laying animals. So the examples of these are turtles, lizards, crocodiles and snakes. Crocodiles are 4-chambered heart animals. Rest of them are 3-chambered heart animals. They can live both on land and on water, but they do not lay their eggs in water. They lay their eggs only in the land. They have a very tough covering on their eggs, so they do not need to lay their eggs in the water. They lay their eggs only on the land. So this is about reptilia. So the last topic in this chapter, diversity in living organisms, is nomenclature. Nomenclature is nothing but giving a scientific name to an organism or a plant or a food. So what is the need for systemic naming of these organisms? See, in the world you have many languages, so all the organisms are known by different languages in the world. But if you give a scientific common name to it, so if you go anywhere in the world, you can name the organism with that word. So that will be, the word will be similar all over the world. That's why every organism was given a scientific name. So this process of giving a scientific name is called binomial nomenclature. So how this helps? It helps in a uniform way for identification of the diversity of the life around us. So this is a uniform naming of every organism for identification of the variety of the life around us. Variety of life means diversity is variety. Variety of the life is all the microorganisms, plants, animals, human beings, etc. So this scientist Carolus Linnaeus in the 18th century first proposed this binomial nomenclature. He wrote a book called Systema Naturae, in which he named about the fundamental taxonomic research. He named about the scientific names of all the organisms around us. Scientific name of an organism, how it helps? It puts it along with the organisms it is closely related to. When we are talking about the scientific name of an organism, it puts all the organisms which are closely related to all the characteristics which exist in other organisms which are closely related to each other, so that all these are put together and given a scientific name. Suppose ants, we have many types of ants, right? Red ants, black ants, big ants. So irrespective of these types of ants, there is a common name given to ant, that's it. They are not given a separate name for black ant, red ant or big ants, small ants like this. Commonly a name has been given for the ant. So commonly a name has been given to an ant. They did not give a separate name for the different colors of ants or the different sizes of ants. So commonly ant has been given a scientific name. Like this, every organism has been given a scientific name. So the name consists of two words. The first word is called genus. Every scientific name consists of two words. The first word is called genus and the second word is called species. And it has been stated that these names will always be in the Latin language. So this name, the scientific name of all the life around us, will be in the Latin form. So every scientific name will have two words. The first word is called genus and the second word is called species. The first word indicates the genus of that family. The second word indicates the species of that organism. Genus is which family it belongs and the species is what type of organism it is. Then genus, there have been some rules have been formulated. What are those rules? The genus has to be written always in the capital letters. The first alphabet of the genus needs to be written in the capital letter and the first alphabet of the species needs to be written in the small letter. Then, while if you are printing a scientific name, it has always to be printed in an italic format. Italic format, not in a bold letters, little bit slanting format. So on printing scientific name, you have to print always in the italic format. Then if you are writing by hand the scientific name, you have to understand and underline the genus and the species name. While writing a sentence with the hand, if you are naming a scientific word over there, if you are writing a scientific word, you have to understand which is that word, you have to underline the word, the scientific word. Then every scientific word consists of a generic name and a specific name. This will be similar all over the world. The scientific name of any life will be similar all over the world. Taking the example of tiger. The scientific name of tiger is Panthera tigris. So here Panthera is the genus and the tigris is the species. So the scientific name of tiger is Panthera tigris. Taking example of a plant, that is lotus. The scientific name of lotus is Nelumbo nucifera. Again, Nelumbo indicates the genus and the nucifera indicates the species. So now you have understood the need for nomenclature. If you go in the world, the name will be, this scientific name will be similar to in the whole world. The scientific name will be similar because if you don't know the language of any particular country or any place, then if you refer to organism with this scientific name, everybody will understand. And the scientific name is always in the Latin form. It consists of two words, that is genus and species. So this is about nomenclature and this completes our chapter diversity in living organisms.